the reason it's so useful is that it's a new fact about our planet. Just came up. The science was really grounded at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, with a paper that was led by James Hansen, one of the world's most foremost climatologists. And the reason the science was so powerful is that we are above the number 350. We have more CO2 in the atmosphere than 350 parts per million. We're actually around 390, 392 at the moment, and rising about 2 parts per million a year. And the reason that's so powerful is that it means that climate change isn't a problem for future generations. It's not something that we look at and say, we have to deal with this or else. Climate change is something that's happening right now, is affecting people all over the world, and especially the poorest and most vulnerable. And that requires a different kind of framework for policy and for action. And to us, it means acting faster, acting bigger, more ambitious, smarter. And it also means acting in solidarity and in concert around the world. So that's where I'm coming from with this whole 350 thing. And if you haven't heard of it, please, when you get back home or when you're online again, jump on and go to 350.org. Very easy to remember. And check us out. It'd be great to have you all involved and connected. So going back a little bit, Lindsay has asked me to talk a little bit about where 350 came from and my organizing experience. And I'll say at the outset, because I know that a bunch of you are college students, that I am now 26 years old. And in the past 4 years, an idea that 6 other people my age and one author has spawned and coordinated over 15,000 climate actions in 188 countries around the world. So if you have any doubt that you are not sure you want to get involved, or you're waiting, or you're confused about how you can make an impact, or you don't feel you know enough to really be an effective advocate, put all of that behind you, because I'm here to tell you that if you step off the deep end, there is an amazing world of social movement to catch you, and that it is beautiful and it's incredibly exciting. So this all started, that idea that spawned all that action started in, well, we were in college in Vermont, not in Pennsylvania, but most likely very similar situation. You know, we had a few classes on climate change and environmental science and U.S. policy and things like that. But many of us that were sitting around those tables and discussing these books and everything felt that we were learning all of these huge concepts about the big problems of the world, but we weren't able to do much about it. We were sitting around an academic table discussing things. And so a bunch of us started organizing on our campus, and we formed this group called the Sunday Night Group, because we would get together every Sunday night after eating dinner at the cafeteria on our school bus tour, showing how to use waste vegetable oil, but more importantly, showing the consumer demand for fuel-efficient vehicles. And we delivered petitions to the big 3 automakers in Detroit in 2005. Much good it's done them, but oh well. It was an incredible organizing experience, and really brought us together with a lot of people who are in the climate movement around the country. So we had a lot of these sort of experiences in college, and when we were set to graduate, we were looking at, like desk jobs in Greenpeace or field organizer with Sierra Club, and then we were sort of looking around the table at each other saying, well, geez, we could really make something of what we have right here. And at that point, we were also in discussions with this author, Bill McKibben, who's affiliated with the college and who's been an incredible advisor to us. And that was probably the first real deep end experience, stepping off together and really going for it. We graduated, and the next day moved to Burlington, Vermont, the closest big city, and set up a folding table and our 5 computers at the time, and started organizing. And really went for it. We went for a National Day of Action, and in 3 months' time, there were over 1,400 events in all 50 states calling on the U.S. Congress to step it up on global warming. This was in 2007. Really, really exciting, really powerful. There were, you can hopefully see the photos scrolling by that are from more recent, but the idea was based in very creative actions, very locally based actions. So we had people skiing glaciers in the Rocky Mountains. We had people like these folks scuba diving in the Florida Keys, but all demanding the same common demand that Congress step it up. And the power of that really came through to us in the success that we had, these 1,400 events, and everyone was so excited to be involved in something so ambitious and so powerful. And really, we just put out a call for something more ambitious, and everyone together was what made it powerful. So that was a very big lesson learned for us, this distributed model of organizing things, and also the big asks, what I have in my notes here. The fact that when you learn about the full scale of the climate crisis, it is such a big problem that it demands big solutions. And just in order to wrap your head around it and really feel like you're doing something, changing your light bulbs is a good thing. Everyone should do it. It makes economic sense. It makes environmental sense. It makes social sense. But it's not going to solve the climate crisis. That's going to require massive government action, international action across all countries. And so for somebody to step out and say, yeah, change your light bulbs, that's good, but we need you to organize your entire community and really come together. That's something that I think makes intuitive sense for the scale of the problem. So that was another one of our big lessons. So that was our first big experiment. And hopefully you're all still with me here, and I'm not just talking out into the ether. No way of knowing, but I'll keep going. From there, we started looking internationally. There was this big UN process that was moving forward on climate change with a big due date in Copenhagen at the end of 2009. And we were looking at the organizing being done and saying, well, geez, this distributed model, what we did in the U.S., could really work all around the world. I mean, all we need is people with internet connections. The internet is more and more spread across all countries. There are probably people everywhere that could access this, and if we have the right message, could really connect to it. So we went to the next UN conference, found hundreds of young people who are all, that's a really funny photo flashing by now. I apologize, I'm getting distracted by them. At those UN conferences, there are hundreds of youth who come there to represent their networks. And so we found incredible allies right off the bat, and really understood that if we went forward with this, we wouldn't be doing it alone, that there are people everywhere who want to do this kind of work and want to be connected, doing it together. So directly after that conference, we again sat around another cafeteria table, this time in Indonesia instead of in Vermont. But we started divvying up the world. There were 7 of us, and there were 7 continents. So roughly worked out. I got Europe. My friend Jamie got East Asia. My friend John had Australia, New Zealand, and the polar regions. because not too many people live in the Antarctic, so he figured he needed a little bit more to deal with on his plate. Um, but that was the start of it, and we really started going for it, just like before with the Step It Up campaign. And this one was a little bit, we had that deadline of Copenhagen, and we wanted the last thing in every negotiator's mind before they went to that meeting to be the incredible power of the movement where they were from. So we set the date for a big action for October 24th, about 6 weeks ahead of the Copenhagen meeting, and launched it with this number 350. The science had just come out, and we were looking at it saying, again, this was a new fact about the planet. It meant radical changes for the kinds of policies and kinds of steps that were needed to tackle this. And one of the other things is that it translates. Arabic numerals, numbers, are one of the few things that mean the same thing in Mandarin and in English and in Norwegian. It works all around the world. So from that, on October 24th, there were over 5,000 events all around the world, and it was really this incredible coming out party for so much of the climate movement. People who are doing this, again, all over the world, but hadn't quite connected in this kind of way before. It was amazing, and we sat in New York, the 7 of us and Bill, watching the photos come in, and tears coming down our faces. And somehow, I think Bill managed to wrangle one of the jumbotrons in Times Square, and we had them flashed up on this massive screen in Times Square in New York, and it was really just amazing. And since then, if you've tracked what's been going on internationally, the Copenhagen process really kind of failed to a large extent. They didn't act on that mandate. They didn't sign a legally binding international treaty to get us to where the science is telling us we need to go. But to us, that meant the political movement, the demand needs to continue. So we've been organizing since then. We took about a month off to sit in remorse in the cold Vermont winter together, and then we got back to work. And since then, we've done another huge day of action last October 10th. That was called the Global Work Party, and we focused on really empowering communities again and saying, we can do work, we can show what leadership looks like on the climate crisis in our own communities, and we're going to demand that our leaders show the same kind of leadership. And so as a way to sort of reinvigorate people and bring the world together around solutions, and then making that same demand of government. And then we also did this crazy thing called Earth Art, where we were able to do about 20 mass art installations around the world and get them photographed via satellite. This was another one of these strange things. I don't know where Bill gets the connections, but found a satellite company that was willing to donate its time to us and capture these art images that portrayed the impacts of climate change around the world. So that's our sort of mode of operations at this point. And this year, I want to briefly touch on what we're digging into. Really trying to go deeper. These things have been incredibly beautiful, incredibly powerful, but that the political change is still there. We have this huge global social movement at this point, but we haven't quite figured out how to leverage it to really move governments. And so, especially in the U.S., we're really digging deep. We have a campaign going on the Chamber of Commerce. This is a huge front group in Washington, D.C., for lack of a better word, that funnels money from some of the most polluting industries into Congress on the presumption that they represent American business, when in fact over half of their budget comes from these massive transnational corporations, and their policies are completely antithetical to what good small business in America would want. They said something like they didn't think business should adapt to climate change, and they thought people could probably adapt their physiology to changes in the climate, basically saying that, you know, businesses aren't nimble enough to compete and change with the needs of the world, and instead we think people's DNA should change rather than our business practices. Which, if you're a business owner, I don't know, I haven't owned my own business, but I thought one of the principles was to be able to move with the times and create what was demanded in the markets. There's an assumption there that I think the chamber is sort of trying to show that it's a broad-based coalition, when in fact it's representing a very small number of individuals and companies. So we're going after them. We're going to try to show that there are businesses and indeed local chambers of commerce everywhere that want the same kind of bold, ambitious climate policy that we do, and that they don't need this national chamber to be trying to represent them in DC and doing it in a poor way. We're also going deeper in a few countries around the world. Now that we have this UN process, we've been there for a few years, we sort of see who's moving things forward. So we're going to dig a little deeper in Brazil, for instance, where they've been really moving on the forestry issues, the Amazon, of course. And we're pushing the EU, which has been sort of a counterweight to the United States a little bit in terms of being a little bit more ambitious on climate change, although they aren't quite comfortable being as much of a leader as the US. And so really trying to push them to be a leader, to step into that ambitious space and say, we need others to do this as well. In addition to doing this targeted stuff, we still want to do what we're good at. So if you have calendars, maybe you have a calendar on your iPhone, pull it out and mark September 24th on it. That's our next big global day, and it's going to be called Moving Planet. And the idea behind that is to use a day to move away from fossil fuels in any way and in every way and get creative with it, but really get that sense of movement and energy and physical motion back into the work that we're doing. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is bicycles in particular. And some of the inspiration from this came from the huge mass bicycle rides that we've had on other days of action, and then things like on our Global Work Day in Auckland, New Zealand, they had all the bicycle mechanics come out to the main park, and they fixed all of the bicycles that people could bring them in that one day. So that sense of using bicycles as a mode of transportation, but also sort of as a political statement, and saying that this is the motion that we want to see, the kind of energy and forward momentum we need on this issue. It's going to be really exciting. So that's what's going on. Without any further ado, I think I want to turn it over to questions. But again, this all came from the brains of 7 college students sitting around a table together, having read a little bit about this, having talked a lot about it, but never having done anything before. We had no experience, and 4 years in, I still feel like I have very little experience. So if this all sounds exciting to you, definitely dig in, and I hope you'll find the same kind of excitement, and I'm sure you can find some of the same success and energy. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Jeremy, and don't worry, you definitely didn't lose us in the middle there.
Cool.
It is definitely hard to tell in this format, but no, we definitely appreciate you sharing your amazing experiences. And I actually have a question for you, and that is something that you kind of touched on, is that climate change is this huge global problem that absolutely requires, the international community to come together and governments to come together to find solutions. So I think it can be kind of difficult as an individual, kind of on a day-to-day basis, to know what we can do, in our own lives to make change beyond just, buying new light bulbs and things of that nature. So I'm just wondering, kind of what your thoughts are about what are some of the most important sort of political actions that we can take as individuals to show our local, our state, and our national government that these are the changes that we want.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the day-to-day of broader social change and addressing climate change. I think the entire 350 thing, the Step It Up thing, everything that we've done has been premised on the idea of relationships. That you can do amazing things with the internet today and connect to people in all sorts of ways and at speeds no one could have imagined when they were sending faxes back and forth for days on end. But all of that is built upon real relationships, either over the phone or in person. Some way of connecting to people that makes us feel a sense of togetherness and that we have a shared purpose. So I think that's sort of a guiding principle for day-to-day life, is that part of my job as a full-time organizer now is just to make sure I'm staying in touch with all of my friends that I've connected with through this work, and seeing how they're doing, seeing what ideas they've had for the social movement, for the political situation, and making sure I'm connected in that community. And there are definitely ways to reach out to people like that. And if you don't have that sort of network, then starting it up and even doing things like potlucks at your house, or watching a climate documentary together, inviting friends over and having a short discussion afterwards. That kind of stuff can be incredibly helpful. Oops. I'm putting myself back on the computer. I don't know if you guys are watching me log back in or not. But. And then beyond that, I think specifically for the United States and for where we are right now, talking to your local businesses and bringing them, we have a fact sheet on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce showing them who these people are in D.C. that are claiming to represent them, and seeing if they agree with those principles. Our experience has been that many of them do not. And that's an important thing for them to know, especially because the U.S. Chamber is standing up and saying, we represent these people and their interests in D.C. So going out and talking to, if you want to start easy, go to the organic food store, or the, I'm trying to think of other green businesses in Vermont. We have folks like Seventh Generation, or the place called the Skinny Pancake that does it's a creperie that does all kinds of great veggie crepes, and they source locally and things like that. So you sort of have a sense of the people that you could start with, and then you sort of expand your reach, and talk to the local chamber and see what they think. I think in the U.S. right now, we see that one of the main obstacles isn't necessarily the politicians themselves, it's the people who are giving politicians a lot of money to say certain things. So removing that influence has become one of our main objectives. I think that's maybe the big message. And then globally, I would say just watching the news and being responsive to the things that are going on in the world. The world is a crazier place these days than it was before, and some of that is due to climate change. And so seeing what's going on and helping out where you can, connecting to people in those communities when you can, to be a more helpful presence, and just to be there to empathize with people. I think that kind of solidarity is going to be increasingly important going forward. So all of those things, and then get involved and do public events, get out and and talk with your local politicians, get them on record saying what they care about with climate change and what they're going to do. So lots to do if you want to dig in. Is the message, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. So we just have a few minutes left, so I just want to see if there are any questions out there that folks might have for Jeremy.
Yeah, I have a question. Jeremy, you talked about climate policy and maybe even the need for the U.S. to take initiative. So in terms of combating climate change, what is the priority action for the U.S. government to take, do you think?
There's all kinds. In the overarching international thing, what we've been looking at with the UN is to step up and accept science-based targets as a long-term goal for international climate negotiations, and then to adapt the kinds of policies that will achieve those scientific-based goals. That'll mean radical reduction in CO2 emissions. It'll mean helping out those in need, sending money to developing countries that don't have the funds to adapt to the changes that are happening right now. And it'll also mean technology transfer, giving away some of the technologies and understandings that we have of how to create energy, especially on a local scale that can be deployed across countries that don't have a lot of resources for infrastructure, and allowing them to develop in a cleaner, more sustainable way. Then here in the United States and domestically, I think the major thing that needs to happen, and what didn't happen last year, was putting a economic price on carbon one way or another. I think we've maybe seen the end of the cap and trade system as it was conceived of before. There's a lot of promise in other kinds of systems. Some of those are being taken up in Congress in small ways now. But we really need that kind of national scale legislation to set the course and set a price on something that, until this point, polluters have been able to dump for free into the atmosphere. And that's probably the biggest single loophole that we need to close as soon as we possibly can.
Great. Okay. Well, are there any more questions out there before we sign off? Anyone? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeremy. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your experiences.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you all. Thanks for coming on and listening to me yabber on.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.